I'm Miranda Wallace, 30 years old, and my family just slammed the door in my face again. My phone buzzed yesterday, a text from my sister: "Don't show up to mom's birthday party. You're not welcome." Her words hit like a slap, but they weren't new. For 6 years, I've been the outcast, the one they erased after I dared to chase my own dreams. Dreams they called childish. They thought I'd fade, that my designs would never see the light. They were wrong. My fashion brand, built from nothing, is now a name they can't ignore, but they don't even know it yet. Mom's 55th birthday party is tonight, a glittering gala at a Salt Lake City hotel hosted by their precious fashion empire. I wasn't going to crash it, not after their rejection. But then another message came from someone I don't know: "You're on the guest list." Be there. My heart raced. Who added me? Why? I clutched my grandmother's journal, its pages filled with sketches that fueled my fire. Her belief in me, unlike my family's disdain, built everything I am. I decided to go to face them, to show them I'm not invisible. At the party, I stepped into a sea of glares: my sister's venom, my mother's cold stare. Then I saw him, their biggest investor, watching me from across the room. His face froze, full of surprise. Did he know me? My designs. My pulse pounded as whispers spread. Something big was about to break, and it wasn't just their party. Buckle up, this drama's just getting started. Subscribe and smash the bell to see their empire unravel. 6 years ago, I stood in my mother's office, clutching a portfolio full of dreams. I was Miranda Parker, then, 24, desperate to be seen. My mother Janet's office at Parker Couture was a fortress of her ambition: sleek desks, racks of haute couture, her control absolute. I'd poured weeks into a bold collection, my hands trembling as I laid out my sketches. Janet didn't even glance at them. "A frivolous fantasy," she snapped, her voice slicing through me. My father, Edward, sorting fabric samples, nodded. "It's not practical, Miranda. Amy's vision drives this brand." My sister Amy, 3 years older, smirked, her confidence a blade sharper than their words. That rejection burned, but it was just another scar in a lifetime of their favoritism. Growing up in Salt Lake City, I was always Amy's shadow. Janet and Edward saw her as Parker Couture's heir, their golden child who could do no wrong. Amy got monthly allowances, thousands to spend on silks and sequins. They bought her a top-tier sewing machine, sent her to Parsons School of Design with every tuition dollar covered, even flew her to Paris Fashion Week to study trends. Her sketches hung framed on their walls, her ideas celebrated at every dinner. "Amy's a prodigy," Janet would say, her voice glowing. Meanwhile, I scraped by, working retail to pay for community college, stitching late nights with Grandma Dorothy's old needles and scrap fabric. My designs, hand-drawn, pieced together with thrift store thread, were stuffed in drawers, dismissed as childish by Edward. "Focus on something useful," he'd say, barely looking up. Grandma Dorothy was my only light. "You'll redefine fashion, Miranda," she told me over chamomile tea, her voice warm, unshaken by their doubts. When I was 10, she gave me her journal, its pages bursting with her own designs, flowing silhouettes, fearless patterns, dreams her family, including Janet, had crushed. "Write your own future," she wrote inside, her handwriting steady. She died when I was 16, but her words lived on, a spark they couldn't dim. I'd sneak into Amy's elite sewing classes, watching from the back, memorizing stitches I'd practice alone. At 12, I designed my first dress, my fingers bleeding from hand sewing. By 15, I'd crafted a gown from leftover scraps. Each piece I showed Janet or Edward got the same response: Amy's the talent, they'd say, their eyes sliding past me to her. The favoritism wasn't just neglect, it was a wall I couldn't climb. Amy's room overflowed with new fabrics, her sketches sent to galleries, her every whim funded. I worked double shifts to buy a single bolt of cotton, my dreams pieced together in stolen moments. Family dinners were Amy's stage. Her latest designs sparked praise, while my ideas were met with silence or sighs. Why can't you be more like Amy? Edward once asked, his tone final. I stopped trying to win them over. Grandma's journal became my anchor, her belief, the only validation I needed. They'll see your worth, she'd promised, her hand warm on mine. That day in Janet's office 6 years ago was the breaking point. My collection wasn't just sketches, it was my fight to be more than their afterthought. When Janet called it frivolous, and Edward backed Amy's vision, every slight from childhood crashed back, every ignored sketch, every unpaid tuition, every time they chose her. Amy's smirk cut deeper than their words, her triumph built on their bias. I didn't beg. I didn't break. I packed my portfolio, walked out of Parker Couture, and swore I'd never chase their approval again. That night, in a tiny apartment, I opened Grandma's journal. Her words burned brighter than their rejection. I wasn't Miranda Parker anymore, not their discarded daughter. I took her name, Wallace, and vowed to build Atelier Wallace, a brand they couldn't ignore. Janet and Edward thought I'd fade, that my dreams would collapse under their weight. They didn't know I'd studied their flaws, stale trends, rigid designs. Amy, their pampered heir, basked in their favor, but I was forging my own path, fueled by Grandma's faith, ready to outshine their empire. The studio in Sugar House smelled of fabric dye and late-night coffee. I was Miranda Wallace now, 24, no longer a Parker. That cramped, chilly studio was where Atelier Wallace took shape. No investors, no backup, just me, a thrift store sewing machine, and Grandma Dorothy's journal. Her words, "Write your own future," pushed me through endless nights, drained bank accounts, and dinners of instant noodles. Janet's frivolous fantasy and Edward's impractical taunts lingered, not as pain, but as fire. I wasn't sewing Atelier Wallace to prove them wrong, I was sewing it to prove Grandma right. The early days were relentless. I pawned my jewelry to buy fabric stitched by candlelight when the electricity cut out. My first collection, vibrant, eco-friendly designs, unraveled at the edges, both literally and metaphorically. But I kept refining, guided by Grandma's journal. Her sketches draped silhouettes, daring textures, patterns no one dared attempt, showed me what could be. She'd faced the same rejection from her family, Janet included, for her bold vision. That legacy fueled me. I wasn't just designing for myself, I was carrying her dream. A year later, I brought on Scott Adams, a pattern maker with the same hunger. We burned through long hours crafting collections to outshine Parker Couture's tired elegance. 2 years later, Amy hit hard. She trashed me online, labeling me the deserter who abandoned her family. Her posts spread through fashion forums, branding my work a reckless pipe dream. It wasn't just slander, it was a calculated strike, rattling my standing in Salt Lake City's fashion scene. Clients wavered, deals crumbled. I wanted to lash out to expose her envy, but Grandma's journal held me back. "They'll see you when you're undeniable," she'd written. So I stayed silent, letting my designs fight. Scott and I doubled down, securing a contract with a boutique chain that embraced our sustainable line. Atelier Wallace began to soar. By 2023, we'd moved to a sharp studio downtown. Our collections, bold green, one-of-a-kind, graced runways for major retailers, brands my family would have begged to impress. Fashion blogs called Atelier Wallace a game-changer, but Janet, Edward, and Amy never noticed. They were too focused on propping up Parker Couture, its designs fading, its market shrinking. Amy's online jabs had fizzled, her spite no match for our rise. I still carried Grandma's journal, its edges soft from my grip. Every seam, every deal was a tribute to her, proof I hadn't failed her. I wasn't done. Parker Couture was slipping their trends, outdated, their grip loosening. My designs could crush them, and I knew their flaws by heart. Amy thought she'd buried me with her words. Janet and Edward thought I'd disappeared. They didn't know I was waiting, ready to step into their world, not as their daughter, but as the one who'd redefine their legacy. The hotel ballroom glittered, but the air was thick with secrets. I stepped into the Lion's Den, Janet's 55th birthday gala, A showcase of Parker Couture's fading glory. My heels clicked each step, a defiance of my sister's text, "You're not welcome." I wasn't supposed to be here yet. A cryptic message from an unknown sender had slipped my name onto the guest list. My pulse raced as I clutched Grandma Dorothy's journal, its weight grounding me. This wasn't about crashing their party, it was about facing the family that cast me out. Amy spotted me first. "What are you doing here?" She hissed, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Her eyes narrowed, her designer gown a perfect mask for her venom. "You think you can just barge in after abandoning us?" I held her gaze, my jaw tight. I was invited. I said, my tone steady, refusing to let her bait me. Guests nearby turned, their whispers buzzing like static. Amy's accusation wasn't just personal, it was a performance meant to paint me as the outsider. My chest tightened, but I stood taller. I'd faced worse than her theatrics. Janet swept in next, her smile as cold as her couture. "Miranda, this is my night," she said, her voice dripping with control. "Don't make a scene." Edward stood beside her, his glance dismissive as if I were a stranger. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered, turning back to a cluster of investors. Their rejection stung, but it was familiar, an echo of every time they'd chosen Amy over me. I was the outcast, the one they'd erased when I dared to chase my own path. Then I saw him, their biggest investor, David Wells, standing across the room, his eyes locked on me, intense, unreadable. My breath caught. Did he know me? My work at Atelier Wallace wasn't a secret in fashion circles anymore, but I hadn't expected him here watching me like I held a key he'd lost. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Someone recognized my name. Amy's glare sharpened, sensing the shift. "You don't belong here," she snapped again, stepping closer, her voice low but lethal. I didn't flinch. "Maybe you're wrong about that." I shot back my words, a quiet challenge. Janet tried to steer the attention away, her laugh forced as she greeted guests. "Let's keep this civil," she said, her eyes flicking to me like a warning. But the tension was a live wire, sparking with every glance. Edward muttered something to an investor, avoiding me entirely. I felt their dismissal like a weight, but Grandma's journal in my hand reminded me why I came. I wasn't here to beg for their approval. I was here to stand my ground. David Wells moved closer, his gaze never wavering. My heart pounded. There was something in his look, not just curiosity but recognition. Had he seen my designs? Heard of Atelier Wallace? The crowd's murmurs grew louder, and Amy's face twisted, her composure cracking. "You're embarrassing yourself," she spat loud enough for nearby guests to hear. I didn't respond, my eyes still on David. His presence was a wild card, a thread I couldn't yet pull. Someone had wanted me here, someone who knew my worth. The question was who. David Wells's voice boomed, cutting through the ballroom's chatter, calling my name. "Miranda Wallace." He said, his tone sharp with recognition. Every head turned, the hum of the gala faltering. I froze, my grip tightening on Grandma Dorothy's journal. David, their biggest investor, stepped forward, his eyes locked on me. "You're the mind behind Atelier Wallace," he declared loud enough for the room to hear. "Your designs are redefining sustainable fashion." My heart pounded. Atelier Wallace. My creation was no longer a secret. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others staring. I felt the weight of every gaze, but none heavier than my family's. Janet's smile vanished, her face paling as if struck. Edward's jaw clenched, his drink trembling in his hand. Amy's eyes widened, her confidence crumbling. "Atelier Wallace," she sputtered, her voice shrill. "That's you." The shock in her tone was raw, almost accusing, as if my success was a personal betrayal. They hadn't known, none of them had. For 6 years they'd dismissed me, blind to the empire I'd built from nothing. David's words hung in the air, a truth they couldn't ignore. I'd outgrown their shadow. My mind flashed back to a moment years ago, 2 years after I'd left Parker Couture. A family friend, Patricia Lee, had visited my tiny studio in Sugar House. She'd seen my sketches, my relentless drive, and promised to show them to someone who mattered. "You're like Dorothy," she'd said, her voice soft, recalling Grandma's untamed spirit. Patricia had sent my portfolio to David Wells, a silent ally who'd watched my rise from afar. That connection buried in time had brought me here, standing in their spotlight. David wasn't done. "I'm investing in Atelier Wallace," he announced, his voice firm, slicing through the room's tension. "It's the future of fashion, Parker Couture's falling behind." Gasps rippled through the guests. Parker Couture. My family's pride was suddenly fragile, its cracks exposed. Janet forced a laugh, her composure a thin mask. "David, let's discuss this privately," she said, her tone tight, desperate to salvage her image. Edward nodded stiffly, his eyes darting to the investors, now whispering among themselves. They were losing ground, and they knew it. Amy couldn't hold back. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, stepping toward me, her face twisted with envy. "You think you're better than us? You ran away." "Miranda." Her voice cracked, betraying her panic. The room watched, riveted, as her polished facade shattered. I met her gaze, unflinching. "I didn't run," I said, my words steady. "I built something you couldn't." The truth stung, and she recoiled, her hands trembling. Janet shot her a warning look, but Amy's outburst had already drawn blood. The guests were buzzing, their loyalty to Parker Couture wavering. David turned to me, his expression unyielding. "Your work's caught the industry's eye," he said. "I've been tracking Atelier Wallace for years." My chest tightened. Years. Patricia's quiet support had laid the groundwork, a bridge I hadn't seen until now. I glanced at Janet and Edward, their faces a mix of shock and denial. They'd spent 6 years pretending I didn't exist, but David's words forced them to see me not as their daughter, but as a rival who'd surpassed them. Amy's glare burned her jealousy, a raw wound, but I stood tall. This wasn't just my moment. It was Grandma's legacy, alive in every stitch I'd sewn. The ballroom fell silent, but my heart blazed with resolve. I faced Janet and Edward, their faces rigid from David's praise. "Your rejection forged my path," I said, my voice cutting like a blade. "You mocked my designs, but Atelier Wallace is outshining Parker Couture." Janet's lips parted, her poise fracturing. Edward's gaze hardened, but he said nothing. His pride stung. The guests watched, riveted, as their empire teetered. I wasn't their daughter tonight. I was their rival, undeniable. Amy stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "You're a traitor, Miranda," she snapped, her voice venomous. "You ditched us for your pathetic dreams." Ryan, Amy's husband, joined her, his tone cold. "You've always been selfish," he said, arms crossed. "Running off, tearing this family apart." Their combined attack was fierce, but it betrayed Amy's desperation. Her need to tear me down only exposed her fear. The crowd murmured, sensing her unraveling. Their aggression was a spotlight on her weakness, not my defeat. I gripped Grandma Dorothy's journal, its pages steadying me. Her words, "Write your own future," burned in my mind, fueling my resolve. Every dismissal, every slight had shaped me. I wasn't here to plead. I was here to stand tall. David Wells moved closer, his voice commanding. "Atelier Wallace is the future," he declared. "I'm partnering with Miranda, and I'm investing heavily." The room gasped, investors exchanging sharp glances. Parker Couture's grip was slipping, and David's words were a hammer to its cracks. Janet forced a smile, her voice tight. "Miranda, we're still family," she said, her tone almost desperate. "Come back to Parker Couture." I met her eyes, unyielding. "Family doesn't crush dreams," I replied, my words sharp. "I built my own without you." Her expression crumpled, the reality of her failure sinking in. Edward stood frozen, his silence heavy. Their legacy was fading, and they had no one else to blame. Amy's composure broke. "I ruined you online," she shouted, her voice shaking. "Those posts were mine to stop your little game." The confession stunned the room. Investors turned away, their faith in her shattered. Her allies fashion moguls she'd charmed, whispered pulling back. Ryan's scowl faltered, his support for Amy wavering as her outburst cost them both. The crowd's judgment was clear. Amy's venom had burned her own bridges. I caught Patricia Lee's gaze across the room. She smiled, her eyes warm with pride. Years ago, Patricia, a family friend who'd known Grandma's spirit, had seen mine. She'd linked me to David, setting this moment in motion. "You're Dorothy's heir," she said softly, stepping near. Her words anchored me, tying me to Grandma's legacy. I stood stronger, my purpose clear. David raised his glass, his voice ringing out. To Atelier Wallace he toasted, the new face of fashion. The guests applauded, their focus shifting to me. Investors nodded, drawn to my vision. Parker Couture, once untouchable, was now a relic. Janet and Edward faced the truth: their business was crumbling, their family fractured. Amy's glare was empty, her power gone. I didn't need to gloat. Atelier Wallace was my triumph, built on my terms, not theirs. As I left the ballroom, Dorothy's journal felt lighter in my hands. The night had shifted the tides. Atelier Wallace was no longer a whisper. Days later, my designs clinched contracts with global retailers, their eco-conscious lines outpacing Parker Couture's dated elegance. Fashion headlines crowned me the industry's new voice, while Parker Couture's orders dwindled, their name fading from runways. My studio buzzed with new hires, each stitch a testament to 6 years of grit. I'd built an empire not out of spite, but because I refused to break. Janet and Edward caught me outside the hotel, their faces weary. "We were wrong," Janet said, her voice low, almost brittle. "We didn't see your talent." Edward nodded, his eyes avoiding mine. "Come back, Miranda," he added. "We can rebuild together." Their words were heavy, a rare crack in their pride, but too late. I shook my head, my resolve firm. "I needed family, not a business deal," I said. "You chose Amy over me. Now I choose my path." I set my boundary clear and unshakable and walked away. Their regret lingered, but it was theirs to carry. Amy's fall was swift. Her confession, spreading lies to sabotage me, had cost her everything. Parker Couture's board sidelined her, her influence gone. Investors, once her allies, turned their backs, her venomous outbursts too costly. Ryan stood by her, but his support couldn't salvage her reputation. She was a shadow of the sister who'd once overshadowed me, her jealousy a cage of her own making. I didn't revel in her ruin, it was simply the consequence of her choices. I sat alone later, flipping through Grandma Dorothy's journal. Her sketches, bold and fearless, had sparked my fire. Write your own future, she'd urged, and I had. Every late night, every pawned ring, every stitch in my first collection led to this. I wasn't just Miranda Wallace, I was her legacy, carved from resilience and defiance. Patricia's faith, David's partnership, my own unbreakable will, they'd carried me further than Janet's approval ever could. I closed the journal, my heart steady, grateful for the woman who'd believed in me first. The future stretched wide. Atelier Wallace wasn't just a brand, it was a movement reshaping fashion with sustainable designs that spoke to a new era. I stood at its helm, not looking back but forward, ready to redefine an industry. Parker Couture's collapse was their lesson, not mine. I'd turned pain into power, rejection into triumph. Amy, Janet, and Edward faced the wreckage of their choices. Amy's sabotage cost her influence, leaving her isolated. Janet and Edward's neglect lost them a daughter and their legacy. Their story is a warning: dismissing talent, choosing pride over love, fractures more than just a family, it destroys what could have been. To those listening, let this be your lesson. Your worth isn't defined by those who reject you, but by the courage to forge your own path. Trust your vision even when others don't. Thank you for following my story to its end. I'm grateful for every one of you. Share your thoughts below. What did this journey mean to you? Subscribe to join us for more stories of resilience and triumph.
I stared in disbelief as flames engulfed my wedding gown. The ivory satin that had taken 6 months to perfect was now a blackening, melting ruin. Margaret Wilson, my soon-to-be mother-in-law, stood before me in the bridal suite of Cleveland's Grand Pavilion, a lighter still clutched in her manicured hand, her face contorted in triumphant rage. "Now you can't marry my son," she declared, her voice high with hysteria. "Jason needs someone from our social circle, not some nobody from the wrong side of town." She tossed her designer purse over her shoulder, looking immensely pleased with herself. "My name is Valerie Mitchell, and at 25, I never expected to be watching my wedding dress burn 30 minutes before walking down the aisle." My 3 bridesmaids stood frozen in shock, their lavender dresses a stark contrast to the smoldering fabric at my feet. "Mrs. Wilson," I said, my voice surprisingly steady as I reached for my phone, "you have no idea what you just did." She laughed, the sound brittle as glass. "What I did?" "I saved my son from the biggest mistake of his life. You think a community college education and a job at a local advertising agency makes you good enough for a Wilson? My Jason belongs with Melissa Hammond. Her father owns half of downtown Cleveland." I pressed a button on my phone, watching Margaret's face as I did. My bridesmaid Jessica moved quickly to open a window, trying to clear the smoke that was now filling the room. "The wedding's off," Margaret continued, waving her hand dismissively. "I'll just tell everyone you got cold feet. Jason will be upset for a while, but he'll understand eventually." "Are you sure about that?" I asked, turning my phone screen toward her. On it was a live view of the ceremony space, the elegant rows of white chairs, the floral arch at the altar, and the massive projection screen that was now displaying a perfect view of this very room, showing Margaret in all her destructive glory. Her face paled. What is that?" "The wedding live stream," I explained calmly. "For Jason's grandparents in Florida and my sister who's deployed overseas. It's been running for the past 20 minutes, capturing everyone arriving, the musicians setting up." I paused, meeting her eyes. "And you destroying my wedding dress while announcing your true feelings about me." "Turn it off." Margaret lunged for my phone, her perfect coiffure coming undone. "You planned this. You set me up." Jessica stepped between us. "Mrs. Wilson, everyone just watched you commit arson on live video. I think you should take a moment to consider your next move." The phone in my hand buzzed with incoming messages. My bridesmaid Tina glanced at the screen and gasped. "It's Jason. He's coming to the bridal suite." Margaret's eyes widened in panic. She looked frantically around the room as if searching for an escape route. "This isn't what it looks like. I was just testing the fabric. Wedding dresses are supposed to be flame retardant." From my phone, we could hear murmuring from the gathered guests. The camera angle had shifted. Someone had taken control of the live stream, and now showed the wedding party's reaction. Jason's father sat stone-faced in the front row. Jason's best man was already rushing toward the building. Most telling was Jason himself, no longer waiting patiently at the altar, but sprinting up the center aisle, his face a mask of shock and fury. "Valerie," my bridesmaid Melody whispered, "what are we going to do about the ceremony? Should we tell everyone to go home?" I looked down at the smoldering remains of my dream dress, now just blackened scraps on the antique hardwood floor. The practical part of my mind, the part that had put myself through college while working 2 jobs, was already calculating next steps. "No," I said firmly. "The ceremony is happening, just differently." The door burst open. Jason stood there, still in his tuxedo, his eyes moving from my face to his mother to the ruined dress on the floor. Behind him, the venue manager and his father appeared, both looking horrified. "Mom," Jason said, his voice dangerously quiet, "tell me I didn't just watch you burn Valerie's wedding dress while saying she isn't good enough for our family?" Margaret's demeanor changed instantly. "Sweetheart, you don't understand. I was protecting you. This girl has been after your money from day one. I was testing her character and—" "Stop!" Jason cut her off. "Stop lying. I heard everything." He turned to me, his eyes softening. "Val, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she would do something like this. I stepped carefully around the burnt fabric, moving toward him. It's just a dress, I said, though we both knew it was much more than that. But your mother just showed exactly what she thinks of me, of us, in front of everyone we know. Jason took my hands in his, seemingly oblivious to his mother's sputtering protests. What do you want to do, Val? It's your call. Before I could answer, Mr. Wilson appeared behind Jason, his expression grim. Margaret, what have you done? His voice was low, controlled, but with an edge I'd never heard before. Richard, please, Margaret pleaded. You know the Hammonds would be a much better match. Their family has been part of Cleveland society for generations. As opposed to Valerie, who built a successful career through hard work and determination. Mr. Wilson shook his head in disgust. You've gone too far this time. My phone continued to buzz with notifications. I glanced down to see messages pouring in from guests who were watching everything unfold on the live stream. The venue coordinator hovered in the doorway, looking uncertain. Ms. Mitchell, she said hesitantly. The guests are asking what's happening. Should we make an announcement? I looked at the ruins of my dress again, then at my bridesmaids in their lavender gowns. A plan was forming in my mind, one that would turn Margaret's attempt to sabotage our wedding into something entirely different. Tell them there's been a change of plans, I said, but the ceremony will proceed in 20 minutes. Margaret scoffed. In what? Your underwear? You can't possibly. In my backup dress, I interrupted calmly. The room fell silent. Jason looked at me in confusion. You have a backup dress? I hadn't, of course, but 6 months of working with temperamental clients at the advertising agency had taught me to always have a contingency plan. Melody, I turned to my bridesmaid. Remember that photo shoot we did for Cleveland Bride last month? Call Eliza and ask if her sample dress is still available. Melody's eyes widened in understanding. The ivory sheath with the lace overlay? It should fit you perfectly. Jason's father stepped forward, pulling out his phone. I'll have my driver pick it up immediately. Where is it located? As they coordinated the dress retrieval, I turned back to Margaret, who stood watching in disbelief as her plan unraveled. You really thought a dress would stop this wedding? After everything Jason and I have been through? But everyone's watching, she hissed, gesturing at my phone. They all saw what happened. Yes, I agreed. They did. And now they'll also see what happens next. I turned to address the camera directly, knowing the guests were still watching. To everyone waiting, thank you for your patience. The ceremony will be slightly delayed, but love always finds a way, even when someone tries to burn it down. A cheer erupted from the phone's speakers, the guests in the ceremony space showing their support. Jason squeezed my hand, pride evident in his eyes. Mom, Jason said firmly, you need to leave. Dad will take you home. You are no longer welcome at our wedding. Margaret's face contorted with rage. You would choose her over your own mother? After everything I've done for you? After what you've done today? Jason countered. Absolutely. The next 20 minutes passed in a whirlwind of activity. While Margaret was escorted out by security, after Mr. Wilson apologetically insisted on it, Eliza from Cleveland Bride arrived with not one but 3 sample dresses. The bridal suite transformed into an impromptu fashion headquarters, with my bridesmaids, the venue coordinator, and even some of the female guests who'd volunteered to help. This one, Jessica declared, holding up an elegant ivory sheath dress with delicate lace detailing. It's perfect for your figure, and we can have it ready in minutes. The venue's seamstress, who had originally been hired just for last-minute adjustments, worked miracle after miracle with safety pins and quick stitches. Meanwhile, Jason had returned to the ceremony space to address the guests in person. Through the live stream, which someone had thoughtfully positioned toward the altar, I could hear him speaking. Today didn't start the way any of us expected, he was saying, his voice steady despite everything. But Valerie and I have always believed that it's not the perfect circumstances that make a marriage work. It's how you handle the imperfect ones together. A round of applause followed his words. I smiled as Melody adjusted the borrowed veil on my head. "There," she said, stepping back to admire her work. "You look absolutely stunning." The dress wasn't what I'd planned to wear when I became Mrs. Jason Wilson, but as I looked in the mirror, I realized it suited me perfectly. Simpler, more elegant, and somehow stronger than my original choice. Like me, adapting to circumstances rather than being defeated by them. Mr. Wilson knocked gently on the door before entering. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Valerie, you look beautiful." He paused, his expression pained. "I want to apologize for Margaret. Her behavior was inexcusable." "You don't need to apologize for her, Mr. Wilson," I replied. "You didn't burn my dress." He nodded gratefully. "Jason sent me to tell you that everyone's ready whenever you are. And," he added with a small smile, "your boss from the agency is here. Apparently he's documenting everything for what he calls the greatest viral wedding marketing campaign Cleveland has ever seen." I laughed. Trust Eddie to see a promotional opportunity in disaster. The advertising world had taught me that sometimes the most compelling stories come from overcoming unexpected challenges. The venue coordinator appeared at the door. "We're ready when you are, Ms. Mitchell. The musicians are prepared, and we've adjusted the lighting to complement your new dress." "Wait," I said, an idea forming. "The live stream is still running, right?" When she confirmed it was, I made a quick decision. "Can we project it in the ceremony space for a few more minutes? I'd like everyone to see us walking from here to there, the whole journey, not just the arrival." 10 minutes later, as my bridesmaids and I made our way through the venue's garden path toward the ceremony space, I knew every step was being broadcast to the waiting guests. Not as a traditional bridal entrance, but as something more powerful. A statement that nothing, not even a vindictive mother-in-law with a lighter, could stop this wedding. As we approached the doors to the ceremony space, I could hear the guests' applause growing louder. Jason waited just inside, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Ready to get married?" he asked, taking my hand. "More ready than ever," I replied, squeezing his fingers. The ceremony that followed wasn't the one we had rehearsed, but it felt more authentic than anything we could have planned. As I walked down the aisle in my borrowed dress, guests rose to their feet, applauding rather than maintaining the traditional reverent silence. Their faces showed not just the usual wedding joy, but something deeper: respect, admiration, solidarity. Jason's father stood proudly in the front row, occasionally glancing at the empty seat where Margaret should have been. His eyes met mine briefly, conveying wordless support. Our officiant, Pastor Mitchell, no relation though we'd joked about it, improvised beautifully. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we are gathered here today to witness not just a wedding but a triumph of love over adversity. Valerie and Jason have already faced their first challenge as a couple, and they've met it with grace, resilience, and unwavering commitment to each other. During our vows, Jason added lines that hadn't been in our rehearsal. "I promise to stand by you against anyone who tries to come between us," he said, his voice carrying to the back of the room and beyond to those watching the live stream. "Even if, especially if, that person is from my own family." When it came time for the exchange of rings, a moment of panic crossed Jason's face. The rings had been with his mother during the pre-ceremony preparations. Mr. Wilson quickly stepped forward, producing the velvet box from his pocket. "I took the liberty of retrieving these earlier," he explained quietly. "Just in case." After we were pronounced husband and wife, the celebration that erupted seemed to release all the tension that had built up throughout the afternoon. As we walked back down the aisle, I noticed Eddie, my boss, filming discreetly from the side. He gave me a thumbs up that somehow managed to be both professional and genuinely emotional. The reception that followed in the Grand Pavilion's ballroom had an atmosphere unlike any wedding I'd attended before. Instead of polite conversation and standard wedding rituals, there was an almost festive defiance in the air. Someone had hastily created a custom Snapchat filter, featuring a phoenix rising from ashes with our names underneath. "Your wedding is trending locally on social media," Jessica informed me as we entered the reception. "People are using Nar rising from the ashes and can't burn love." Jason's college roommate Tom, who worked in public relations, approached us with his phone. "The Cleveland Plain Dealer wants a statement. Their lifestyle editor saw the live stream. Apparently her niece was a guest. And they're calling it Cleveland's most resilient wedding." "Tell them we're just grateful for everyone's support," Jason replied, his arms secure around my waist. "And that true commitment means facing obstacles together, not running from them." As the evening progressed, I noticed Mr. Wilson speaking intensely with various family members, damage control evident in his gestures and expressions. Jason's Aunt Diane approached our table during dinner, leaning down to speak privately. "Richard is beside himself," she confided. "Margaret's been escorted home, but she's threatening to cut Jason out of the family business if he doesn't come to his senses. Richard told her that after today, she's the one who needs to worry about her position in the company." Jason squeezed my hand under the table. "Dad's always been the backbone of the family," he said. "Mom just never realized it because he let her think she was in charge." As our first dance began, I couldn't help but notice the empty tables near the front of the room, spaces reserved for Margaret's country club friends, who had quietly disappeared after the incident. In their place, colleagues from my advertising agency had moved forward, filling the void with genuine support. "Mr. Wilson is handling damage control like a pro," Eddie commented, approaching us after the dance with 2 glasses of champagne. "He's personally thanking everyone for staying while subtly letting Margaret's allies know they won't be missed." Jason nodded, watching his father work the room with newfound respect. "I think this is the first time I've seen him stand up to her so publicly," he murmured. 27 years of marriage, and today was his breaking point. The wedding photographer, initially hired by Margaret, approached us cautiously. "Mrs. Wilson, the younger Mrs. Wilson," she clarified with a smile. "I've captured some beautiful moments today, but I wanted to ask about the dress incident. Some of the guests took photos. Would you prefer I request they keep those private?" I exchanged glances with Jason before answering. "Actually, I think honesty is the best approach here. This is part of our story now." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a notification. The short clip of Margaret setting fire to my dress had already been viewed over 20,000 times on a local Cleveland news page. The comments section overflowed with support, interspersed with stories from other brides who had faced difficult in-laws. "You might not have planned it," Eddie said, scrolling through the comments, "but you've started a movement. Standing strong in the face of toxic family relationships is resonating with people." Jason's cousin Mia appeared at our table, her expression a mixture of embarrassment and determination. "I want you both to know that not everyone in the family shares Aunt Margaret's views," she said firmly. "Most of us think she crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." "Thank you, Mia," I replied, genuinely touched. "That means a lot." As the evening progressed, Jason received a text from his father. He read it silently before showing me the screen. "Your mother has locked herself in the guest house. She's demanding I choose between her and that girl. I've informed her that her behavior today has made my choice remarkably easy. We'll discuss next steps when you return from your honeymoon. Proud of you both. Dad." "Are you okay?" I asked Jason quietly, searching his face for signs of regret or doubt. "I'm better than okay," he replied, squeezing my hand. "For years, I watched Mom undermine Dad, belittle you, and manipulate everyone around her. Today, she finally showed her true colors to everyone, not just us. It's like a weight has been lifted." As the reception continued, I noticed something remarkable happening. Guests who had been stiff and formal at the beginning, Margaret's side of the family and social circle, were now relaxing, engaging more genuinely with my friends and family. Without Margaret's watchful eye, the artificial social barriers she'd maintained were dissolving. "Mrs. Wilson?" The venue coordinator approached with an unexpected smile. "There's something you should see." She led us to the entrance of the ballroom. There, prominently displayed on an easel, was a large photo frame filled with dozens of handwritten notes from guests. The heading above them read, "Messages of Love and Resilience for Valerie and Jason." "Your bridesmaids organized this," she explained. "They asked guests to write messages of support after what happened." 1 week into our honeymoon in the Maldives, the full impact of what had happened at our wedding was still unfolding. Jason and I sat on our private deck overlooking crystal blue waters, scrolling through messages on our phones during our daily check-in with reality. "Dad says Mom's staying with her sister in Cincinnati," Jason said, setting his phone down. Apparently, Aunt Linda is the only person who still believes her version of events, that she was testing the dress fabric and everyone misunderstood. I smiled wryly, adjusting my sun hat. Hard to misunderstand someone shouting, "Now you can't marry my son," while holding a lighter. The Cleveland media had picked up our story in earnest. What began as a sensational local wedding disaster had evolved into a conversation about toxic family dynamics and standing up for healthy relationships. Several women's magazines had reached out requesting interviews about maintaining boundaries with difficult in-laws. Eddie says the agency has received 3 new client inquiries specifically asking for the team with the wedding dress Phoenix. I laughed, showing Jason the message. He wants to know if we'd consider being part of a panel discussion on crisis management when we get back. Jason took my hand, his thumb brushing over my new wedding band. "Only if you want to. We can keep this private if you prefer." I thought about the messages we'd received from other couples facing similar challenges with disapproving families. Maybe our experience can help others. Not the way I planned to start our marriage, but authentic, Jason finished. Like us. 3 months after our wedding, Jason and I attended the Wilson Family Foundation's annual gala, our first major public appearance since returning from our honeymoon. The event, typically orchestrated by Margaret, had been completely reimagined under Mr. Wilson's direction. "Nervous?" Jason asked as our car pulled up to the Cleveland Art Museum. "A little," I admitted, smoothing my gown, a stunning emerald design from Eliza's boutique, who had turned our wedding story into a successful marketing campaign about resilience and second chances. Inside, the atmosphere was noticeably different from previous years. The stiff formality had been replaced with genuine warmth. Mr. Wilson greeted us at the entrance, looking years younger without Margaret's controlling presence. "There they are," he beamed, embracing us both. "The couple who inspired our foundation's new initiative." He guided us toward a display showcasing the Wilson Family Foundation's newest program, Rising Phoenix Grants, for women starting over after difficult life transitions. The foundation logo had been redesigned to incorporate a subtle phoenix motif. "We've already approved funding for 15 women," Mr. Wilson explained proudly, each one rebuilding after challenging circumstances. As we mingled with guests, I noticed Margaret's absence had affected the guest list. Gone were many of the society climbers and status-conscious acquaintances, replaced by people genuinely passionate about the foundation's work. "Mrs. Wilson," a young woman approached, introducing herself as one of the grant recipients. "Your wedding story gave me courage to leave my toxic marriage. Now I'm starting my own business." Later that evening, as Jason and I shared a quiet moment on the museum's terrace, he received a text message. "Mom's coming back to Cleveland," he said, his expression thoughtful. "Dad says she's agreed to counseling if she wants any chance of reconciliation." I squeezed his hand supportively. "Whatever happens with your parents, we'll face it together." "Just like we did with the wedding," he smiled, pulling me close. "Some flames are meant to destroy. Others just reveal what's unbreakable."